Welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. Today is a special episode because guess what? We're at 100 episodes. It's hard to believe. So, today we're going to have a little bit of a reflection and a little bit of a celebration. So, with that, let's bring in my fantastic co host, Michael Regan.
Well, I'm here, happy to be here, and always happy to be with you because we sure have a lot of fun doing these. I've noticed that over the last 2 years, and again, roughly 50 episodes a year. So here we are at 100. It's really fun. I look forward to recording with you each and every time. And I think, that's a question that I get often is, hey, are you still having fun with your podcast? And my first litmus test of fun is when it's on my calendar. Do I look forward to that, or is it like, oh, we're doing that again? And I'm always excited to record with you, Catherine.
Oh, thank you. I love that. Yeah, that definitely is a good test from the coach's mouth. So I'll take that. And it's also fun because it's just one of those things where it's like I feel like every podcast I learn a lot, which
Mm.
sometimes I feel like I'm cheating, but it's great because if I get stuff out of the podcast, hopefully other people do as well. So it's been great to learn and grow, and that's what we're going to cover a little bit today.
It's funny that you say that because I bet there are a few listeners out there who might have joined us somewhere along the journey, but weren't aware of how our journey started. And what I think is really important for the audience to realize in the comment you just made is, Catherine and I have worked together now for going on a decade in a coaching context, but somewhere along the way, Catherine began to have this vision of a plan she wanted to execute on something that would have looked maybe like a podcast. We weren't 100% sure, but it could have looked like a podcast. There were some other ideas of where it could have been a Facebook Live, it could have been a Instagram Live or a YouTube Live. We hadn't fully baked that out, but it was going to be focused on entrepreneurs in the local community in which you live and operate. And that idea, for whatever reason, got derailed, I believe, during this, I don't know, international pandemic called COVID. Um, and that sent you to a totally different platform. Remind the audience where your journey took a left turn and what that platform looked like, because they may not know this story.
Yeah, so that was I even had a name, Small Town Big Life.
Mm.
And it was a little bit about moving to a small town and some of the things that come along with that. And it like all of a sudden Michael said, "Hey, are you still thinking about that podcast?" I said, "Yeah, it's still kind of on my list." And then he said, "Well, what do you think if we maybe do something like that together?" And my first thought was, "Wait, really? Me?" I like, whoa. And then is Michael doing this because he's trying to fulfill one of my goals? Wait a minute. Like is he just doing it to help me? But I think he gets as much joy out of it as I do. So off we went and started coming up with ideas, figuring out how we were going to get this out to the markets and just figuring out if we were even any good at this. And I think we've come a long way from episode one and to episode 100. Hopefully, you guys can tell a little bit of a difference, but it's been pretty fun to
Yeah.
watch the evolution of it.
Yeah, one of the things I remember, Catherine, and if I haven't said this to you privately, let me say it publicly so everybody can hear it, is what was really fun during COVID was you embraced the Clubhouse platform.
Yes.
And when I say embraced, folks, if you were on Clubhouse during that, 2020, 2021, maybe a little bit into 2022 window, some folks had accounts, some folks logged on from time to time to check out, who was on, who was doing what. Catherine was like committed to this as a creative outlet, partly because it was her legitimate social outlet. Like it was a chance to connect with people in our industry, but she also ended up getting sort of voluntold to take over the mastermind group in Clubhouse by Dave Savage, and you ended up being the host every week. I think Tony maybe joined you quite
Yep.
a bit,
Yep.
and so I got to see you in action in a light that I hadn't seen before.
Mm.
And I want you to know that because, I maybe do have a broadcast journalism degree. So maybe I was comfortable with this before we came up with the idea, where you really had to step into this idea out of curiosity and out of a willingness to try. And I want our audience to know that because sometimes they might feel curious about something we've talked about and they have a willingness to try. And I want you to serve as a really good example of this wasn't like your professional aspiration. This wasn't even like an old hobby that you had. You just said, okay, Clubhouse, let's figure that out. And I watched you thrive on that platform in really great ways. And it gave me a lot of confidence when I did approach you to say, that crazy idea you had? What if we combine that idea with an idea I have and we do something that ends up looking like building bigger lives?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to throw in a little bit of fun, one of the craziest moments on Clubhouse, there was a few, but one of them was in a housing wire room that I think was being run by either Logan Motoshami or Clayton Collins. Clayton's been a guest on our podcast. We're talking about some sort of compliance thing, and maybe this was Rob's room, I can't remember, but who pops in? But the almost like going into term CFPB, head of CFPB pops into the Clubhouse room, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh!" And then boom, he gets put up on the like the stage. So it was an exciting moment for all of us in that room because how often do you get to actually chat with somebody like that? That was
Yeah.
the magic of Clubhouse.
Yeah, Clubhouse had its moment in the sun. I'm not sure, like many of these tech platforms, they have their moments, but boy, was it a great moment. I mean, and it really
Yeah,
hit at a perfect time because it was a virtual version of what we were all missing, which was the
yeah.
opportunity to gather together. To the credit of Housing Wire, it wasn't long after that that they merged with the Gathering of Eagles and combined their events to create now what is the Housing Wire Gathering, which now feels like the real life version of some of those rooms,
Right.
which is really fun. Listen, Catherine, I want to ask you this, and we're teeing this up with a little bit of the backstory, but what has surprised you most about this 100 episode journey we've been on? When you look back, what surprised you most?
So, number one, no guest has said no. At least I haven't heard that they have. Maybe you've been keeping that from me, but nobody has said no, which says something about you and maybe me as far as being willing to trust us to go essentially kind of in a live format where we're going to ask them whatever. We have had nobody answer anything we can't ask them about. And I think that willingness has been really great to see. The other piece that surprised me is when you have to go back and listen, right? You evaluate yourself pretty harshly just because that's human nature. But what I really love is when I listen, it does really sound like a conversation, like two people really listening to each other and talking with really good flow. And I think that's something that actually I was surprised by of, wow, we actually really sound like podcasters. And I don't know why that's weird, but it kind of is to me. What about
Uh,
you?
Surprise, surprise. Yeah, that's a really good segue to the one that surprised me. And so you hinted at it. Most of our audience, well, maybe they're not aware of this. So let me just, pull the curtain back and you can pay
Mhm.
attention to the man and the woman standing behind the curtain. We don't script our podcasts. And so that means we're live without a net. Yeah, but you guys can do some post editing. And I suppose in the event that Harley started barking in the background, which did happen one time, um, we can do that. Catherine, I think 98% of what we've published is unedited. Poor
Mhm.
Scott Higby, who shout out to Scott Higby with Studio C out in Southern California. He is our editor. He does a great job of weaving together the things like the bedding for the soundtrack, making sure that all our volume meters are adjusted properly. He does a great job of making sure that what we publish really feels great. But he says to us, guys, you're doing great. I don't have to edit a lot of what you're doing. So here's the surprise, I think, is that our that we've really been able to do that well. It very much takes me back to my radio days when we did talk radio, and the on-air light would come on, and that on-air light would happen, and you're live, and there's no opportunity to hide at that point. So you're either going to get really nervous and sound nervous and awkward, or you're going to ignore that light, focus on the person in front of you, and you're going to have a real conversation. And I agree with you completely. That has been what it feels like. Little secret sauce to the audience who is largely following us on Audible or Spotify or Apple podcast is we do record this on Zoom in order to have that experience of really looking at each other while we're recording. And I think that does help because it does keep the engagement level high. I'm never in that awkward space of wondering, is she even listening to me? Are we even on the same page with this? There's a lot of good, eye contact, head nodding. Catherine gives me a head shake, like, oh, no, 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 don't do that. But all of that really helps keep it really natural. So I think that's what surprised me is that we've worked really well together. And I think both Todd, your husband, and Lori, my wife, have said the same as, well, you guys sound like you've been doing this for a long, long time.
which is great. That's a huge compliment right there, I think. So, all right. So one thing I want to ask you, because I think you know a lot of our guests better than I do, which is great because I've been able to learn from them. But which episodes or guests have really stuck with you, and what are the pieces and parts maybe that they said that you still think about today?
Well, it's a really great question because if you do look back over the series of our podcast, it's been a lot. We've had a lot
Hmm.
of guests. It's not a 50-50, but it's probably a 70-30 at this point and rising because as time has gone on, and I think more people have followed our podcast, you're right. We've had some folks raise their hands and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm loving your podcast. I'd love to be a guest if you'd ever consider interviewing me." And that's fun. So, it's so hard to call out individual people because then you forget individual people, and that's always a little bit of a thing that I want to be careful of. But I'll tell you right off the bat, our friend Todd Bookspan was our very first guest. Todd was an easy person for me to ask because he and I have known each other both personally and professionally for a couple of decades now. Our families know each other. We've spent a lot of time together in really every different version of a environment you can think of. We worked in an office where we shared a common wall together, so
Hmm.
we were technically competing with each other. We had a season where Tara, his wife, did some work on our team. So, we had that opportunity, which was fun. We participated in some industry events together where we both went as participants. Heck, I think was one of the first guys he gave permission to redline the what became the Win by Noon Journal. And he sent me the draft copy, not the original copy because I've seen that one too. That was his original fifth grade art project where he had the old Building Champions journal and he had cut and pasted all this stuff and he basically built his Win by Noon journal like an art project. I saw that version too, but he sent me the version that he wanted to publish and said, "Hey, I'd love it if you'd scrutinize this, if you'd really redline it." I was really proud of that moment because A, I love Todd as a person, but B, I still think to this day that Win by Noon is a great product for folks that are looking for that level of tracking. So to have him as our first guest, really fun. I think our second guest was our friend Ken Perry. Many of you know, as a coach with Building Champions, we've since this podcast launched, we've partnered with Knowledge Coop, which is Ken's company. At the time we had him on, we weren't yet partners. So what was fun about that was we legitimately invited him on because you love the guy, I love the guy, and we just wanted to share his energy with our audience. So that one stands out to me as well. But it's fun to now see how our relationship has developed into a true professional partnership between the two companies. So of course those stand out. I'll say this as a broad stroke in completion of this thought is it's really fun to feature people who the audience might not have heard of before they pressed play.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
hope that's been fun for them to see a name in the queue and hey, new podcast, Michael and Catherine are interviewing whoever that person is. I love the idea that their first thought is, well, I don't know who that is. That actually for me is fun because one of the things that inspired you and I early on as we thought about interviewing folks is let's don't go for everyone that everyone's already
Hmm.
interviewed and heard from. Let's find some of those people that have great stories, but maybe are a little less known. And so that's, I would say, maybe if we're just looking for an overarching response, super fun because we've had dozens of those and they've all been great.
Yeah.
How about you,
Yeah.
Catherine?
Let's see. So some of the ones that have stuck to me, Clayton Collins, just because I did know him through Clubhouse, but I got to know him a lot better through our interview with him. And that was kind of fun to hear about and hear about his background. So that was a really good one for me. And then I still like kind of the ones that teeter on another industry, like when we interviewed the person from the organizing. Is that Courtney?
Yeah,
Um,
Courtney
yeah,
Wilson.
Courtney. I really liked that one just because it's such an interesting thing to me. So that was kind of outside the box and a little bit fun. And then I always like the people I have this, you know, relationship with. Like Ken is another example of that, but also John Donnelly, just because I've known him for a long time. He's such a great person, and that just comes through in an interview, which it doesn't, it's sometimes hard to get a read on people's personality, but with him, he just can't help it, it just comes out. So those were always fun to talk to John. And he's, I think, our only guest we've had on twice.
It's true. And as you said that, I thought, that's really fun for me because, like you, I love the guy. I've spent a lot of personal time with John. John is the guy who convinced me that I would like fishing, even when I didn't think I was going to like it. And fun fact, I do like it now. Yeah, it was really interesting when I thought about us inviting him back because, for most of our guests, we want to be thoughtful of the idea that, hey, we'd love to have you back when there's really something new and
Mhm.
exciting to talk about. John decided since our first recording to go and climb Kilimanjaro.
Yeah.
I don't think we've had too many guests that have decided to do that. I think that really stood out to us. The
Yeah.
12-hour walk was exciting, and I think several of our guests were impacted by that and have shared their stories. But Kilimanjaro, that's another level, and so it was hard not to invite him back to
Hmm.
share that story. Uh, Catherine, I have a question for you. You and I
Hmm.
get to record these, and we already admitted most of these are unedited. But before we hit record, we sometimes have a chance to banter, and we don't necessarily record our prep, but maybe share with the audience what does that look like? Let's call them off mic moments if you like. These are well,
Hmm.
they're on mic, I suppose, the off recording moments. What are some of those memories over the first 100 episodes when you and I were thinking through how to hone in on exactly where we wanted to go before we hit record?
For the two, for I think for the two of us, it's kind of always fun because sometimes it's like, oh, how are you doing today? Okay, I'm super this, or I'm having a hard time with this. And sometimes there's those little moments just kind of solidify our friendship a little bit more. So I always like those because it's a quick kind of check in ahead of time. We can get caught up. But then there's just some moments too where you can, there was one guest in particular, and I won't mention who it is, but you could physically see him relax once it was done. And then we could kind of have more of a conversation at that point. I think the video kind of maybe made him nervous. And so sometimes just seeing people outside of that, if they are nervous, is kind of fun because I really like to see people's true personality. And that doesn't always come through if you do hit that record button. So sometimes those after moments of just, oh my gosh, that was really fun, or oh my gosh, I'm so glad that's over, but it was good, but it was stressful. Like some of those are kind of fun for me to see as well. What about you? That you can think of?
So here's one that stands out, and it was an episode that is really a unique one that we recorded. We've done several event recaps over the years, whether they've
Yeah.
been events you've attended, events I've attended, or sometimes we've been able to attend together, which is also fun. But we went to the Broadmoor in Colorado Springs
Yeah.
earlier this year for the Housing Wire gathering, and at the gathering we decided let's record at the gathering together. Let's don't come back and do a recap. Let's do the recap from right there in the room. Now, it was clunky. Like the event had ended.
Yeah.
The room was practically packed up other than the backdrop. They basically just said, "Well, yeah, we still have the backdrop. If you guys want to go record, go do it." And we did. We didn't have, proper microphones, so I think we passed the mic because, you brought
Yeah.
a handheld
I
mic that
remember
we were
that.
able to pass. All of it felt clunky, and yet it was really fun. It didn't bother me that it wasn't perfect. For our viewing audience, maybe they picked up on the fact that okay, the video feed wasn't tight. There were a couple of weird latency or jitter in the video feed that weren't present in the audio feed. So if you listen to it on audio, you didn't even know that. But the video was a little clunky. But I look back on that and thought, all that made me do was say, let's do more of that. Let's find more opportunities
Yeah.
to meet in person, whether it's at a great event like that or in other settings that we think are appropriate. That was really fun for me. And again, all of that was off mic. Nobody really knew that or saw that we were, in this janky closet at the Broadmoor. It wasn't really a closet. It was a back room behind their stage that was for the recording. It was like their podcast room, but they were basically closed up. We were sitting in a room full of boxes with a backdrop. That was a
Hmm.
pretty fun moment.
That was pretty fun. And I don't know if you remember at the end, somebody walked in and we might have been closing out. I don't know if we were closing out or still recording. And we were like, oh, we'll be done in 2 minutes. So
Yeah.
that was one of
Maybe
those
that was one
times.
of those 2% of the time Scott maybe did edit for us was, okay, nobody knew that that
Right.
happened. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
possible.
that
That's
that was
possible.
I'm glad that you brought that up because that was a pretty darn good moment. So now I want to maybe move to some of the listener stuff. So what's some of your favorite feedback that you've gotten from, listeners? Let's call them fans, if we can stretch and call them fans of the show as you've been out and about.
Well, first of all, that does seem like a stretch. I don't know that anybody's going to be a fan, but if they are, that's really sweet. Here's the thing that I would tell you right out of the gate. So this is going back to episode 1 and episode 2. Of course, we had really great listenership right out of the gate because we pushed that thing out and we asked people, hey, take a listen, give us some feedback. It was really fun, really early on to get feedback from folks that said, how can this be your first episode or two? You guys sound like you've been doing this for a long time. Now, I think the quality of what we do has improved. I think our ability to speak more fluently without uhs and ums has improved. Our ability to maybe anticipate how each other work. Even that weird thing I like to do where I point to make sure that I'm not doing all the talking. Uh, all those things have evolved, but it was great to get feedback early on from folks that said, "No, you're in the right lane. Keep doing this. It's working." And as time has gone on, some of the feedback I've received is fun when it's random. Like, "Hey, I just listened to your episode on dot 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 whatever that topic was, and it was great. I shared it with my team, or it was great. I actually used it at a sales meeting." When you start realizing, wow, that wasn't even the intended purpose of that recording. I wanted to edify the end user on a personal level, but they took it and multiplied it. They shared it out. That's humbling and exciting at the same time. And so when I get that feedback, that encourages me to say, don't forget, you never know where the topic that we've chosen is going to hit. Sometimes we've chosen it because it was just something we were personally excited to talk about. Sometimes it was on a long list of things we said, hey, at some point, these would be good things to talk about. But it's
Mhm.
fun to find out later that the feedback you get is, wow, that was perfect timing. I'm so glad that was this week's episode. I don't know, let's don't over spiritualize it. It's just kind of fun to know that we hit that episode at the right time. And I love that feedback when we get it. How about you? Any
Yeah.
feedback you've received that stands out to you?
Yeah, actually, at the last conference I went to, Selena said, hey, I wanted to tell you the episode you did on imposter syndrome really spoke to me. And I was like, oh, good. Because that was kind of my baby episode where I was like, I really want to talk about this. And I did all the research on it. I listened to a couple podcasts and just kind of dove into the topic and really spent a lot of time on that episode. And so the fact that it spoke to her and that she really loved that episode make it was just like, oh, yes. Even if she was the only one that listened to it, boy, that was worth it. So that was pretty great to hear when I was at the CCM conference here a few weeks ago.
That's really great. Really great. All right. Well, let's look forward a little bit, Catherine. I think there are some things we can look forward to. I don't think this isn't a swan song. Hey, 100 episodes, high five. We did
Peace
it.
out.
Yeah, this is, we're hoping to continue this. The format could change. I want to be clear about that. As the world evolves, we want to evolve with it. One thing that was, well, it existed when we started was AI, but we didn't understand the compound effect of AI. A year and a half, 2 years ago, like we might see it today. And that'll continue to compound, which means there could
Hmm.
be some opportunities to do some things differently in the future that we just don't know about today. And we want to be agile to that because that's part of our mindset. We both embrace the growth mindset. And part of the growth mindset is okay, let's try new things. Let's see if there are new ways to solve old problems. And so I look forward to the podcast evolving. But generally speaking, give me a glimpse of some things that, if we were running the old coaching exercise of a keep, improve, start, stop, what are some things you would say, I want to keep doing that because I love that? And what are some things I might want to improve upon if we keep moving forward?
Yeah. So for me, I think I want to keep doing what we've been doing as far as not scripting anything, just talking from the heart and continuing to ask good questions of our guests, but also continuing just to focus on helping our listener. And I think that that's the biggest thing if we're providing value to our listeners, then that's a win to me. And I think we've done a great job of that over the past 100, but I want to keep doing that moving forward. As far as what to start, I think we have talked about maybe diving in a little bit deeper in some of the interviews and talking a little bit earlier in time with some people, because that's pretty fascinating. I
Yeah.
keep having this question from Bob Goff that circles in my head. That's what's your chapter 12 or something. So of a book, that's when things really start to head south and when things are really tough. And that's when people stand up and say, hey, no more of this, or I have to make a change, or I'm going to rise above. And his question was always ask people what that chapter 12 is, or what that,
Mm.
I forget the chapter number. I should probably look that up. But he said that's kind of when you're really going to get to know somebody. And a lot of that has to do with when they were beginning and they had those setbacks and they had to come through them. So I'm pretty curious to hear that about people, and I'm excited to dig into that with our guests. What about you on Keep Start Stop?
Yeah, that's really a great one. So let's do make note of that because I like where you were going with that quite a bit. Because you're right, I am fascinated by these backstories. It's so often when we have interviewed folks that are in leadership roles, it's so tempting to want to talk about the things they're currently doing and the things they see in the future. But what we've really tried to do is take a look back and look at the forensics of their story. Like, hey, tell me about the background from which
Mhm.
you came, the things we wouldn't know about. And often what comes out are the things you're talking about, those moments of adversity that they had to fight through, maybe the scarcity of not knowing how to move forward
Yeah.
because there wasn't any more money, there wasn't any more time, and they had to figure it out. Some of those are powerful stories. I'm really glad you mentioned that. I love those ideas a bit, quite a bit. And I told you already, I look forward to also looking for ways in which we can take our podcast out and invite our guests to join us live. I really like that idea. You know, lots of podcasters do this, and there's pros and cons to having a live studio. And I think it's something that I look forward to because the dynamic of being in a live
Yeah.
setting when we can is definitely a level up. So I want to look forward to that as well. I also think that there are some opportunities for us to do to change some of the timing where we could do these long format weekly podcasts, but we could also do some short format things in between. You know, you're doing a great job of helping us take the content we've recorded and make it available to folks on our socials. And so if you're listening out there and didn't know this, you know, go follow us on Instagram. Catherine's doing a great job of cutting those clips up so that we can, in fact, share those out. I do a little bit of that on LinkedIn as well. But I want to do some of that with the actual recorded content rather than having to cut up long form content. Let's maybe even think about what are some ways we can record a 5 to 7 minute episode because it just we punch it and that's all we need. Give someone that short boost that they need, and so that might allow us to use our YouTube channel in different ways than we currently do it. You know, maybe the Apple and the Spotify podcast should remain true to the rhythm we've created, but we can create other content on Facebook, Instagram, and house everything on YouTube. So I'm curious about that and looking forward to playing with that a little bit. Um, but you said something I want to tie down, and that is, you know, maybe in good coaching language, we've had a mission with building bigger lives from the beginning. We've had a mission, and maybe we don't spell that out as clearly as we could to our audience. And today's a good day to do that because if I look back, one of the questions I ask is, have we remained true to our mission? And in this way, I really think we have. We always said, in addition to, hey, this will be a fun outlet for you and me, in addition to, hey, this is a great chance to share people's stories that they might not have heard or from leaders that they might not have heard. True, true, true. We never said, let's go out and build a podcast that has to be measured by how many followers do we have. We
Mhm.
agreed that if our followers saw great value, if these followers were entrepreneurial people, meaning they don't necessarily have to own their own business. They just have to think like an entrepreneur. They have to think with that ownership mindset. You know, they maybe read Jocko Willink's book and said, "That's me. I embrace the ownership mindset of extreme ownership." They If we can empower those folks with creative thoughts, if we can empower them with creative stories, if we can empower them with creative resources, then they will go create. They will go create new plans. They will go create new
Mhm.
opportunities. And that's growth. And I think that's what building bigger lives was always about, was helping folks build a bigger life. Now, that could be personally, that could be professionally, or it could
Yeah.
be some beautiful blend of the both. We don't know each audience member. Some folks may come here to hear our personal stories. Some may say, I could care less. Give me the business value. And some may like the fact that we weave in and out of both. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure that everything we do stays true to that mission, that an entrepreneurially minded person would finish an episode and say, wow, that really helped me think differently about something I'm now willing to go and do out in the world in which I impact and influence. And maybe we'll never fully know the total impact of that, but that excites me to think that we're impacting people's lives that have never even heard of who we are.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really well said. Really well said. So good job.
Well,
Just,
it's an important thing to me, Catherine, because some folks do podcasts for vanity projects. It's just a fun way to have your content out there, and maybe even that they're only thinking that, like, I need to create content so that I have content, so I can publish content, and now people will find me. Uh, Newsflash: I'm not looking for coaching clients with this
Mhm.
podcast, and same with you. You're not looking for loan origination from this podcast. Now, if that should happen, we're going to be grateful and thankful, but that is not our purpose. When you talk about a mission, that's what we're going to go do. The purpose is the why
Mhm.
behind it. That's not my purpose. In fact, my purpose is driven by the same purpose I have in coaching, which is I want to know that when people had the opportunity to interact with me, that they would look back on that and say, I don't know what it was about that guy, but somehow, some way, he helped me think differently in order to do things differently, in order to have different outcomes. If I impacted their life to where different outcomes happen, I don't need to take any credit for what those outcomes are. I just helped, I'm the Sherpa or no, the porter, if I go back to John Donnelly's language. I'm just the porter. I helped them figure out how to get there. And that's what I
Mhm.
hope that drives me as a purpose. If good things come from that benefit you or benefit me, that's a blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. And somebody asked me at a recent conference, why are you doing the podcast? And I said, it's part of it is this industry has given us so much.
Hmm.
And you forget how much you've learned over 20 years, 25 years. Like, it's crazy. And did it all come at once? No, I've learned it incrementally over implementing two or three things every year, right? And I wish that I would have had more help when I started my career with some of those basic fundamentals of business plan, life plan, quarterly plan, keep, start, stop, all those things. And so it's a way to get some of that knowledge out to people that hopefully gives them a leg up so that they can be successful in their business. And I think that's one of the things that drives me.
All right. Well, I've got three thank yous that I want to wrap up with. So
Yeah.
if you don't mind, let me give those out. First of all, I want to thank Building Champions, because without my company standing behind what we do as a sponsor of this podcast, I'm not sure that it ends up looking like what we've done. We might have cobbled something together, but it probably wouldn't have looked like this. And so I want to say thank you, because they gave me the opportunity to be able to work with you in this light and work with Scott and really be able to pull this together in a way that I am excited about. And I look forward to the next 100 episodes. So shout out to Building Champions. A big thank you to all of you on the team. And you know who you are, who helped invest in what became Building Bigger Lives. Pretty good segue to our friend Scott Higby, who I will thank second, because, Scott early on gave us the confidence to say, guys, here's what you need. Here's how this works. Here's how to do it. He was so confident in both our ability to do it and in what we would need to do it that he made it feel pretty easy for us to just press play. I'm not saying we didn't do some heavy lifting to get this thing off the ground, but it didn't feel like heavy lifting because Scott's spirit as a producer was exactly what you would want. He gave you that sense of ease of, you've got this. Just go, do what you're called to do, and I'll make sure it sounds great when it comes out on the other side. And so, Scott, I just want to say thank you as well. And Catherine, I want to thank you in the third slot, not because it's the final slot, but because I don't want to leave without saying thank you for believing that I wasn't doing this just to throw you a bone so you could figure out how to check a goal off of your old business plan. I really did this because I believed in you, and I do believe in you, and I continue to believe that you and I can get better at this and continue to add more value on this platform. So thank you for joining me on this journey. I love having a co-host. It's my favorite style when I get that exchange of both sharing ideas and hearing ideas. So you brought a lot of creativity to the table, and I appreciate you. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Well, back at you. I think that I'm so lucky to be able to do a podcast with my business coach. Like, what a great honor it is for me to be able to learn from you every single week. And sometimes it's in how you interact with our guests, but also it's how you interact with me. And thanks for pouring everything you do into this podcast and into me.
Let's say that's a great place to put a pin in our 100th episode. A lot of gratitude, because really, I think that's the spirit in which we started. We were grateful to have this opportunity, and we're still grateful to have this opportunity. So folks, if you've been listening to this episode 100 of the Building Bigger Lives podcast, we want to thank you. Thank you for being with us along the journey of the last 100 episodes. Maybe you came in around the first or second. Maybe you joined us around the 50th. Heck, maybe this is the first time you've heard the episode and you're thinking, 100? Who knew they had a back catalog? Please go back, whether it's on Apple, whether it's on Spotify, whether it's on Amazon through the Audible app. You'll find all of those episodes available to you. And many of them are evergreen episodes. They're not caught in a moment in time. They were just recorded and published at a moment in time. And everything about them is still valuable and applicable in a way that you might enjoy. So go find them, go share them. And here's an ask. If you've enjoyed anything we've been doing in these first 100 episodes, we'd love to get your feedback. You know, on those podcast platforms, you can, in fact, write a review. We don't often ask for those, but I just want to remind you that if you are compelled to do that, that'd be a great way of letting us know that you've valued something about what we've done to add to the universe of podcast content that's out there. That'll be a wrap on today's episode. We hope to see you in the new year, and we look forward to delivering more content on Building Bigger Lives.